is Paris on Politics from Fox 32 Chicago.
In tonight's opening shot, some thoughts on the combative nature of the pro-Israel and pro-Palestinian movements here in Chicago. Now, let me qualify this. I don't have a dog in the fight. I'm not Israeli or Palestinian, and I have no family in the region, but I will give you my observation of what's been happening here at home from having covered dozens of protests and demonstrations on both sides. Now, I fully acknowledge the very real and the very raw emotions that people feel about this conflict, especially for the myriad Chicagoans with loved ones in Israel and Palestine. But both sides are at risk of being overtaken by voices who are drowning out the more reasonable calls for a ceasefire and an end to the death and destruction. On the pro-Palestinian side, nearly every rally I've covered has featured chants like, "From the river to the sea, Palestine must be free," and, quote, "globalize the intifada." Now, the Anti-Defamation League has declared the former chant a clear cry for cleansing of the Jewish people out of that region. To call the latter anti-Semitic would be putting it kindly. Some might see it as a call to violence against anyone that supports Israel. Words have consequences, and those consequences, as we tragically witnessed last week, have become deadly. Also, it's rare to hear leaders condemn the events on October 7th, 2023, when Israel was attacked, 1,200 people were killed and more than 250 were taken hostage. And the militant leaders of Hamas, a satellite of the Iranian ruling regime that has expressed a desire to destroy Israel. What, is that just a minor inconvenient detail? And now on the pro-Israel side, it's not often you hear a demonstrator call out Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu for the ruthless, gruesome attacks on places like hospitals that have resulted in untold death of innocent civilians. And what about the starvation of Gazans due to the cutoff of supply routes for humanitarian aid? Is this just all a part of defending the homeland? Do we just not acknowledge the flagrant Israeli violations of international law over decades with the continued building of settlements in the Palestinian West Bank? And no, it is not anti-Semitic to criticize and demonstrate against the government of Israel or against the actions of Netanyahu. Anti-Zionism is also not the same thing as anti-Semitism. Claiming otherwise only diminishes actual anti-Semitism. I've seen a dangerous groupthink set in over the past 2 years of witnessing these movements in Chicago. My side is all good, your side is all bad, and there's no nuance. So why am I wading into this? Because the two sides are constantly talking over each other. They must be talking with each other. It must be said, if your real motivation is the end of the Israeli state or to clear out Gaza and turn it into some Trumpian Middle Eastern playground, you are not for peace. If the majority of folks involved in these movements would like to project that they really want an end to the horrible and senseless killings, then they should call out the extreme elements on their own sides, because they have completely lost the plot.
Coming up on Paris on Politics.
He's not a member of our organization. I've never seen this person in a meeting.
Legal drama. One alderwoman threatens to sue another alderman for incendiary comments, attempting to link her to the alleged Washington D.C. shooter. Why the Israel-Gaza conflict has become personal on Chicago City Council. And one-on-one with candidate for U.S. Senate Raja Krishnamoorthi. Can he rise above a potentially crowded field?
This is Paris on Politics from Fox 32 Chicago.
Welcome to Paris on Politics, where we take you behind the headlines and beyond the spin. The conflict between Israel and Gaza has grown personal on Chicago City Council. 33rd Ward Alderwoman Rodriguez-Sanchez has sent a letter to 15th Ward Alderman Ray Lopez threatening legal action if he continues to make statements attempting to connect the alleged D.C. shooter to her political organization. In comments on conservative radio, 15th Ward Alderman Ray Lopez said Elias Rodriguez was a homegrown terrorist, quote, supported by and involved with the alderman of the 33rd Ward. I spoke with Alderwoman Rodriguez-Sanchez earlier today, who told me why she has resorted to legal threats.
We have seen messages on social media talking about, first for my community, right? I saw a post, for example, from former Cook County Clerk of the court, Iris Martinez, asking for my resignation. She's a member of our community. And that was hard to see because there was no evidence that I was linked to this person. There is no evidence that my organization is linked to this person. This person has never volunteered with our organization. He's not a member of our organization. I have never seen this person in a meeting. So it was really hard to see that. But then we started seeing online messages that said things like, there is blood in your hands. People are going to come hold you accountable on Wednesday at the meeting. And it is nerve-wracking to see that kind of thing because I don't want my colleagues to be at risk. I don't want to put myself in harm's way. But, you know, apart from all that, I think that my integrity is worth something, and nobody wants their name associated with somebody that killed 2 people. That is absolutely horrible. Our message, even with the ceasefire, if you read that resolution, our message is of peace. Our message is that we just want to stop the bombing.
Well, and one of the things that Lopez and some others have insinuated is that some of the rhetoric, the anti-Zionist rhetoric, has created a culture where a lone wolf like this might act out. Do you accept any of that?
No,
kind of criticism?
Absolutely not. I think that we can have ideological differences, and I'm going to tell you, when the little Palestinian kid was murdered by somebody who was definitely, yes, by somebody that was definitely adopting an anti-Palestinian and anti-Muslim rhetoric. We did a press conference, but I didn't go and say, this is Alderman Lopez's fault, or this is because of what Alderwoman Deborah Silverstein said. This is because of her resolution. I never said anything like that. I did say the rhetoric that is being used to talk about Muslim people is dangerous, and this is the consequence of it. But pointing fingers to specific people and essentially trying to, you know, get people to attack, that I think that is inappropriate, is irresponsible, and we just don't want to see any more violence.
What, and I know that your message has kind of been written out in this letter, but what is your message to Alderman Lopez?
We just want him to stop repeating falsehoods. It is very clear in the letter that we sent what are the things that he has been saying, and I am hoping that he will read the letter and that he will stop attacking us.
And joining us now, our 15th Ward Alderman Ray Lopez and 25th Ward Alderman Byron Sigcho-Lopez. Welcome both of you. First, Alderman Lopez, you've seen the letter. What is your response?
I did read the letter that was sent, and I know what my tweet says, that the individuals in the picture are birds of a feather. However people want to take that, that is on them. But what I know is this, is that the rhetoric that has been embraced and amplified by Rodriguez-Sanchez and many of the socialist members of the city council, the vitriol that has come from their lips has been targeting the Jewish community in particular, particularly over the last 600 days since the October 7th attack. They associate with groups that have connections with Hamas. We have seen where individuals who've come out of her community and out of my colleague here's community have promoted a very dangerous set of terms for indoctrination.
Right. When you call out this socialist,
to be perfectly honest, you know, where was that her concern for peace and love that she talks about when all of this was going on? Her ward soup, people that they associate with, where the PSL, where as we see today,
that's
many
that
of the
group,
garb,
people for
the Party for
Socialist Liberation. That this alleged shooter was apparently a part of. But when you say the socialists in City Council, you mean the Democratic Socialists, of which you are a part of, Alderman Sigcho-Lopez. So do you accept that criticism then?
Well, look, I think that these narratives that have been elevated of violence, anti-Semitism, actually come from my colleague Alderman Lopez, who hangs out with Proud Boys, goes regularly to podcasts, elevating anti-Semitism.
As long as you say it on TV, so that we could get our letter ready too, because you're going to blame me for anti-Semitism?
I'll give you a chance to respond. I'll give you a chance to respond.
Literally on the shoulders of people who call for the elimination
Let me give Alderman
You were at an event this weekend saying by any means necessary to get rid of the Jewish state, and you're going to sit here and say, I'm the author?
Let me respond. Again, from our calls, from our movement, we have always been clear about we are about humanity. This is about anti-genocide and genocidal tactics that are killing people. Anti-Semitism and anti-Muslim sentiments, the hate speech that has been flourished, is the result of this kind of narratives.
When folks say, hold on one second. When folks say globalize the Intifada, is that anti-Semitic? I mean, I think most people would construe that as anti-Semitic, and I hear that a lot of the Israelis.
What are the places where I attend, and when we are chanting for a free Palestine, when we see the atrocities that are committed, I mean, I don't know how anybody can be okay with that. I think that we're not dehumanizing anybody to elevate anybody else. What we are saying here, and again, from the Progressive Caucus, from the Latino Caucus, from members of my community, we have condemned the murders in D.C. I just don't know why it's so difficult.
From the Socialist Caucus?
Well, but let's see.
How about that?
Well, again,
you condemn what they said, that by any means necessary.
We just
condemn that.
Let me respond. We just heard from alderwoman Rodriguez-Sanchez.
Do you condemn that?
She has condemned it. She just said it to Paris. Now, let me.
Socialist, do you condemn that?
I'm telling you, as a socialist, we are condemning that.
I
am condemning, and our names appear in the statements that were public. Are you going to condemn the genocide? Are you going to condemn the dehumanization of Palestinians? Because,
I'm not
again,
going to allow for the conflation of two things. Israel was attacked, which you and your supporters openly celebrate. Even this weekend, 3 days ago, you still celebrate that 1,200 people were killed, that over 250 people were taken.
Let's go to the facts. Let's go to the facts.
58 people still are being held by Hamas terrorists, and you have never once condemned that. You blamed the Israelis, you blamed the Jewish people for being there, for celebrating peace and what could be a two-state option, because what we see most out of your group is an indoctrination attempt at our communities for political purposes.
Because I haven't had an
opportunity. Nothing in the Middle East.
Let me put that in context.
Political purposes.
You were out at one of the rallies this weekend in favor of Palestine. Was that the best look, given what happened last week, given the murders in D.C.?
Again, we have condemned the murders of 2 people in D.C., period. What I don't understand, I have not able to understand, is how any politician cannot condemn the murder of innocent young kids. We saw there was a little girl trapped in a hospital while being bombed. How can,
which has
and that
been
is a genocide?
Which again, you still have not answered about the 1,200 people killed innocently that day.
But Raymond, let me look. You keep interrupting me. But look,
PSL 3 blocks from your ward office.
Again, this is that organization that this
associate with
shooter.
Behind enemy
Look,
lines.
you don't have to read, Raymond. You don't have to read the
I have
points.
to read because you are associated with so many organizations. I can't keep them straight.
Because I don't need to read.
Okay,
look,
guys,
I really want to know.
1 second. We got to go to break. We got to go to break. Hold your thoughts. We're going to come back and give everyone a chance to air this out. So we will be right back. Welcome back. Again, we're joined by 15th Ward Alderman Ray Lopez and 25th Ward Alderman Byron Sigcho-Lopez. Okay, Alderman Sigcho-Lopez, you want a chance to respond because Alderman Raymond Lopez is basically saying that the Democratic Socialists are tangential to some of the movements that this killer came out of, the alleged killer.
Again, there's no evidence linking Alderwoman Rosanna Rodriguez-Sanchez to this to the shooter, to the killer. Now, what I want to make sure is that my colleague understands the facts. Fact of the matter is the City Council condemned the October 7th actions. The fact of the matter is that the City Council and many members of the City Council have condemned the shootings in D.C., period. Now, what I would like to get from my colleague and many other elected officials is that when is the time for them to condemn the genocide, what's happening in Gaza, what's happening to Palestinians? And to me, it's very important and very clear. We are for humanity. We are for the humanity of our Jewish community just as much as the Palestinian community. We do not negotiate with people's humanity. And what I see here is a struggle to condemn the atrocities, the genocide, what we see, the number of examples, children, women, men who are being slaughtered right now as we speak. I do think that I would like to get my colleagues to condemn as well.
Let me pose that question to you. So, Alderman Lopez, do you condemn some of the actions that the Netanyahu government has taken, some of the killings, some of the indiscriminate bombings that have taken civilian lives?
I do condemn the fact that they've been put in a situation where having terrorists use people as human shields has caused for innocent people to absolutely be used as pawns in this war. Absolutely. All of this could have ended if the Hamas terrorists had chosen to turn loose and free all of those hostages 600 days ago. but they've used them as well as the Palestinian people for their own political purposes. That's what all of us should be condemning right now, because all of this would have ended months ago.
All right, let me also ask you, too. There is no evidence, as the alderman said, linking Alderwoman Rodriguez-Sanchez or anyone on her staff to this alleged killer. So will you take that social media post down? Or, does it threaten defamation?
So to say that there's no linkage while you are hosting book club readings with the same organizations that promote the most vile, vitriol propaganda against Jewish people is like saying that white hoods and burning crosses are not directly connected to the Ku Klux Klan. They are hand in hand together when we see that these organizations that are oftentimes propped up by Hamas-related fronts are trying to indoctrinate our youth, trying to infiltrate our communities, and then are given legitimacy by our politicians. Yes, they are connected. Yes, they are integral in their neighborhoods. This gentleman came out of her own community. I'm sure they've had interactions. You have organizations in his ward. But we don't have proof of that.
We don't have proof that they've had interactions.
Yet.
But to make a statement like that,
but how do you say that you don't have interconnectivity when everyone in her circle is in the same group as this individual?
All right.
How do you say that there's no culpability when you have organizations that espouse some of the worst rhetoric in wards that aldermen and politicians show up to?
That rhetoric.
You're not off the hook.
We said anti-Zionism isn't exactly the same thing as anti-Semitism, but when we make this about being against the right of Israel to exist, anti-Zionism, isn't that fanning the flames? Isn't that making Jewish people in Chicago feel more unsafe?
Well, but the fact of the matter is the state of Israel exists. So that is not even a question. I think a question here is, are we going to stop the genocide, or are we going to continue to allow these atrocities? The question is, are we going to continue to spread falsehoods, putting people at risk, including a colleague who just shared with you that has been getting threats, not because there's any evidence, not because there's any proof, because someone is parroting what the propaganda is being spread. And I do think is very important. I think from our case, we are for humanity. We are for a world where we can coexist, when our Jewish community or Palestinian community can coexist. I think the danger here, and again, and I will repeat, is when we have colleagues like mine who go to Proud Boys shows to speak on with people who actually have.
I have to get your. Were you at a Proud Boys show? Are you doing things with Proud Boys?
You were not with a podcast with
falsehoods.
Were you not with Newsom in a podcast?
Was I doing a podcast and going to a show are two totally different things? You should know that. You do them all the time.
Were you with that?
How about this? When you want to talk about propaganda and putting people's lives in danger, when you join groups and chant saying "from the river to the sea," and you put our colleague Deborah Silverstein in danger, do you take any responsibility for that? When our colleague Rosanna, who chose not to be here today, says, I don't want a Zionist doctor touching my children, and now that puts people in harm's way.
That she put out there.
Social media post she posted, and you put people like our colleague Deborah Silverstein in harm's way where she needs police protection for her and her staff. Do you take any responsibility for that?
But look at this.
How about that?
There's a difference.
No, there is no difference.
A huge difference.
Your rhetoric.
We're about out of time, but let me give Alderman sigcho-lopez.
Let me respond very clearly with you, right? Alderwoman Silverstein has gotten the full support of the city council when it comes to October 7th. When they were about the shootings in D.C., yes, she did. Now, let me just end with this, Paris.
Because you and the mayor conspired to intimidate her on city council.
What we have not gotten from Alderman Lopez is a condemnation of what we have not gotten from Alderman Lopez is a condemnation of the genocide. What we have not gotten from Alderman Lopez is to say decisively that what he's saying in the media is not true. And we got to start by telling the truth and telling the facts. The fact
would be a wonderful way for you to start telling the truth.
Let's do this. We are out of time, but let's have you two stick around. We'll do more that you can see on the web, but we have more to get to right after this. The primary race for Illinois Senate is off and running. We've sat down with two of the three Democratic declared candidates, Lieutenant Governor Juliana Stratton and Congresswoman Robin Kelly. So this afternoon, we talked to 8th District Congressman Raja Krishnamoorthi at Los Comales restaurant in Little Village.
I think we're in this moment where we have to stand up to the Trump administration and make sure that the American dream, which a lot of people feel is slipping out of grasp or almost impossible, becomes accessible again, and that we can overcome this economic chaos we're in right now. And the two things I would point to that qualify me for that job are, I've made a career of standing up to bullies from within Congress, whether it's going after e-cigarette companies that prey on youth to hook them onto vapes, or it's Purdue Pharmaceutical, which tried to hook a whole generation of people onto OxyContin. I went after them and got results, and now I have to do the same. The other part of it is I've had a career of working on issues of economic mobility, whether it's for working poor people or middle class or people growing businesses. As a former small business person and now in Congress, I've been working on skills-based education to make sure that the 60% of Americans that don't have a four-year college degree get access to a world-class post-secondary education. And now 11 million people annually are getting a better, high-skilled education because of my law.
There's a clear legislative record here, although Democrats are in the minority now, so it might be harder to propose and pass bills if you're in the minority party. But let me ask you, Rahm Emanuel's gone on TV saying the brand of the Democratic Party is too weak and too woke. Do you agree with that?
I think it needs improvement for sure, but I think it really needs to focus on economic issues. What are the economic pain points that people feel? So just as an example, look at my own story to see how, today you couldn't necessarily climb the economic ladder the same way my family did. I'm a child of food stamps and public housing. When our family was in economically difficult times, those are literally on the chopping block today in Congress. The public schools that allowed me a gateway to the American dream, they are constantly under assault. And, hats off to District 150 in Peoria, Illinois, for where I am today. I credit everything to that public school education. Finally, that legal immigration system that enabled us to come here, that's being actively dismantled. So I think that right now we have to focus on how do we make those things better, but also avoid cuts to that social safety net, which are right now happening under the Republicans' reconciliation bill. 800 to 900,000 Illinoisans are about to lose their Medicaid. That's a travesty.
In terms of getting traction, it's fair to say that a big chunk of the electorate here isn't quite as familiar with who their representative is or who their lieutenant governor is, and so money plays a big role. You raised $19 million before you even announced. Governor Pritzker has probably endless amounts of money that he could give to his endorsed candidate, Stratton. Is that what it's going to come down to?
I think resources will matter because, Illinois, it turns out, is a big state. And in addition to, appearing in different news segments like this one, at some point you're going to have to get your message out. But at the end of the day, I think people really want to look at your record. They want to look at what you've done in Congress or wherever you've been, and what are your values, and where do you come from? I'm a son of downstate, and I bring those values to the table, ones of respect for everybody, making sure that everyone has a chance to climb the economic ladder, and then finally making sure Illinois remains the best place to raise a family, to start and grow a business, and that it becomes, it realizes its full potential.